Mixing and arrangement are two of the most important things to making good beats. It's not only how you make your beats sound good, but it's also how you make them sound interesting. And if your beats sound interesting, that means rappers and artists, they're gonna listen to those, they're gonna hear it's interesting, and they're actually gonna wanna listen to them. So some of my subscribers sent me their beats to fix. Their beats have some issues with the mix and arrangement, and I'm gonna go through these beats, fix them up, and give you my best tips for arranging your beats and mixing them. So let's get into it. Lazy Beat says, "What's good, Riley? You might know me from beat review streams. I've been producing music for over a year now, and the 1st of July was my producer anniversary. Happy anniversary. Anyways, I haven't pinned your beat on any beat review streams ever, so you wanna know what's actually wrong with your beats and how you can fix them. So let's give it a listen and we'll break down exactly what you can do to make your beats better. Also, if you're wondering why I have a different hat on than usual, my usual hat got super soaking wet, rain. Honestly, you have really good beats, but it feels like it mostly just comes down to mixing for you. Your melody's good, you're doing a lot of good things, your drums are pretty solid. So let's dive right into the mix. Now, in terms of the mix for your drums, I'm a little confused with what you're doing with the hi-hats, and I'm just gonna assume you're using Fruity Love Filter as an effect that you wanted to add to your hi-hats and not for mixing, which is totally fine to do. And I also see here that you put your hi-hat in mono. Again, I'm going to assume this is effect-based because this is definitely not a necessity. But if you want to play around with it, you could put it in mostly mono, like 50%. And my biggest problem with your hi-hat is it's just way too quiet in relation to the rest of your drums. My bad, I did not realize you automated the Fruity Love Filter. That's kind of cool. Now I see you're doing a lot of EQ everywhere, that's fine, as long as it actually is adding some value, which I think in this case it is. And the changes you're making are pretty subtle, like this 808 change you have here. Now aside from that one small change with your hi-hats, I feel like your melody could just be glued together a little bit more with some compression. And if you want to make it a little bit wider, which will open up some room for your drums in the center, you can throw a spreader on there and just turn up the spread if you want. I feel like with your snare, it'd be really cool if you just kind of pan things from side to side a bit. You're not really doing anything all that bad. But there's one big thing I'm noticing that really will help you a lot with your beats. Unless your arrangement is just very much stale. Like if we look at your entire beat here, there's a few changes in your melody, but for the most part, everything else is staying mostly consistent. And I would really encourage you to play around with that. Like, I don't know, just spitballing ideas here, but I feel like you could throw a beat cut, like right here, I guess. And really get creative with those cuts too. Like, I don't know, we could just throw in a cut here maybe. And whenever you do these cuts, it's always good to just like smoothen them out with a riser. I'd say in this section, it's really clear you're going into your verse, so you can just cut out a good chunk of your drums. And then probably what's holding back your arrangement the most from having a lot of variety, which can really lead to your beats just getting boring and repetitive over time, is you have these two things playing throughout the entire beat and they're not really changing a whole ton. So maybe for this next chunk of the verse, we could just cut those out. And maybe we throw this in here as well. And we can really like play around with it and just make it a little bit more unique and different. Now I want to cut it out here because it'll smoothly, or that's not a word, transition back into what we've got over here. I think too, it'd be really cool if you just kind of played around with some different 808s at this time. But you could just get a little bit creative with what you're doing at the end for your 808. We really want to be saucy. We're going to put more risers in here, or just really any kind of texture or ambient sound to really tie things together. I know I've said this a few times, but at the end of the day, what you want to do is create a vibe. Trust me, that's what Mozart did. Honestly, too, I'm thinking here, like, it would be kind of cool if we cut out this main melody chunk, or at least some of it. Now this next beat comes from Jombe. Shout out to Jombe. And Jombe says, "Hello Riley, I think I'm about to hit 2 years into producing soon, and I feel like I can make decent stuff at this point." That's very true, Jombe. You can make pretty damn good beats. You think your weak points are arranging and mixing your beats. Now let's give it a listen. Yeah, Jombe. Melody's good, mixing, something's questionable here. What are you doing? And first things first, I'm hearing that your 808 is having some difficulties cutting through the mix. Usually when this is the case, the first thing I want to check is the low end of the melody. And that doesn't seem to be an issue here, but just to be safe, I'm going to cut out a little bit of that low end. In terms of your 808, everything is mostly fine, but you're playing this G4 note down here. It's pretty low for your 808, so it's going to sound really rattly, and it's going to have like this gross rumble to it. And there's two things you could do to try and deal with this. First, on your 808, you could cut below 25, 20 hertz. That sometimes will deal with some of that rattle, but if it's not enough, you're better off pitching your 808 up an octave or just to a different note. Now to get your 808 sounding a little bit cleaner as well, I'm going to throw a soft clipper on the 808. And this is probably the worst part in your entire mix, your entire beat. I'm sorry to say it. But your kick is literally just clashing with your 808 at times. Now there's a lot of different ways you can deal with this. You could align the phases of your 808 across each of the notes. But the way this sounds, it doesn't sound like it's a phase issue. And it more so just sounds like the two are fighting for the same frequency space. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to EQ slot your kick in with your 808. So like, let's just find somewhere where we want to boost the kick a tiny bit. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then on your 808 here, we're going to turn that same frequency down by just a little bit. And then it's also kind of sounding like the tail of your kick is starting to have some issues with the 808. So we can just shorten your kick a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like this hi-hat sample. So I'm gonna find like a similar sample and just use that. And you're not really doing anything bad with your hi-hat. You've got like a cool, weirdish kind of bounce to it. I think you could really use the feedback delay to kind of build on that bounce you have. Now you kind of have a similar issue with your arrangement where you're kind of just repeating the same things over and over and over again. So it gets a little boring to the listener. You're doing a little bit more with your drums, but the melody is pretty much the same throughout. And a lot of the times less is more, so you could just remove some stuff and maybe get more of a sound you're looking for in your arrangement. You could remove this layer up here too, because it doesn't really feel like it's adding a whole ton in this section. And to smoothen up this transition, you can cut everything out right around here probably. And I think we could really make this a little bit more climactic by removing everything except for this melody here. And now for this section here where you're kind of killing off a ton of energy, I think it would be really cool to bring in this vocal you have with Arcade. Leave in the pad, and then you would just want to kill off a lot of what's going on in the melody too. And again, don't sleep on this mixing trick, but if you throw a compressor on all of your melody together, you can really get a more glued together sound. Now, if you want to submit your beats for a video like this, all the information you need is down in the comments. And if you want to check out the last video where I fixed my subscribers' beats, I'll put one of those videos somewhere around here.